7 years have been home right here at the Strand, 2 of which were virtual. So it's so wonderful to be here in person in the Rare Book Room. So welcome home, Alice Awards. My grandfather, dad, and I have worked all of our lives here at the Strand with books. The store has been in my family for 96 years. I can't imagine a world without books, especially the exquisitely illustrated books that Furthermore and Alice have encouraged. The best part of the whole experience has been getting to be friends with Joan Davidson. Joan, I know. Joan, you are such an inspirational force. Your mom, Alice, would be so proud of you. So I guess speaking here is Ian Wardropper. He's the director of the Frick Museum and been a long-term jurist for the Alice. So I'm going to let them take it over from here. Thank you all for being here.
Well, good evening. It is a thrill to be live again. The program actually took place first in the Morgan Library and then was at the Frick a couple of years and then found its home at the Alice. And we're so grateful to Nancy and all the staff here for making this happen tonight. And it just feels like a perfect place, like a homecoming. So thank you so much. I'm going to just say a few words. We're celebrating the 10th anniversary, as Nancy said. And I'm going to say a few words about Joan Davidson because we're not just celebrating books, but we're celebrating Joan. And she's known for cutting people off if she doesn't like what they say. So I'm going to get this in really quickly and hope that she doesn't stop me in time. But for those of you who don't know, Joan chaired the New York State Council on the Arts and was commissioner of the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. From 1977 to 1993, she was president of the J.M. Kaplan Fund, a New York philanthropic foundation established by her father in 1945, and well known for its innovative support of the environment, preservation, the arts, and civil liberties. Now President Emeritus and a member of the fund's Board of Trustees, she continues to advocate for the architecture, design, and quality of life in New York City. Joan has served and continues to serve on too many boards to list. Let's just say she is indefatigable. Joan's visionary leadership has been recognized with numerous awards and honors. Again, this is too long a list, so I'm only going to mention 3 that have a certain metaphoric quality to me. The first is the Historic District Council's landmark Lion Award. The second is the Preservation League of New York State's Pillar of New York Award. And the final one is the Museum of the City of New York's Silver Dollar Award. Joan has indeed been ferocious in protecting architectural treasures, a sturdy support of culture in the state, and generous in funding worthy causes. Joan. So I'm just going to say a few words about the Alice Award, just for those of you who may or may not know it. So during 27 years, Furthermore has supported over 1,300 publication projects by grants totaling $8 million, a record of support for nonfiction books unique among private foundations in the United States. Joan initiated the Alice in honor of her mother, Alice Mannheim Kaplan, in 2013 as a complement to Furthermore. It celebrates and inspires richly illustrated books in the fields of fine arts, the natural and built environment, and related public issues. In the past decade, $340,000 has been given to 10 Alice recipients and 30 shortlisted books in recognition of their high standards of production and contribution made to their fields. Joan likes to keep her operations lean, so I want to shout out to Anne Birkmeyer, and who takes care of Furthermore. And Elizabeth Howard, who sees to the Alice, for their heroic efforts to run these prizes. Small staffs and shoestring budgets make sure as much of the foundation money as possible goes to the recipient. The prize for the Alice is $25,000 to the winner, $5,000 to the shortlisted publications. When I became chair of the jury a year ago, taking over from the redoubtable Jock Reynolds after he retired from the Yale Art Gallery to find his bliss in California, I was curious just how special the Alice was among book awards. So I asked Stephen Berry, the Andrew Mellon Chief Librarian of the Frick Art Reference Library, what he knew. Of course, he passed the buck and he asked one of his interns. All of our interns are paid now, so I don't feel badly about this. And she searched and did a spreadsheet for me. It turns out that as far as we can tell, well, there are several prizes without financial awards for art books. There are only 2 others with financial awards. So the American Library Association, Art Library Society of North America, Alliance of American Museums, and College Arts Association give awards, and they are certainly prestigious, but without funds attached. Only the Daedalus Foundation, the Robert Motherwell Book Award, started in 2019, and the Smithsonian Charles Eldridge Prize for a single author monograph or catalog give money. The Alice is the only one in the general art book category. There's a couple of specialized awards in photography, and it's the only one focusing on the successful integration of design and thesis. Why should that matter? Well, I don't have to tell you that most of these authors are not expecting to make any money off their efforts and often have to struggle to cover rights and reproduction fees, travel for research, and other costs. They need encouragement. Making beautiful and creatively designed books is often the goal of publishers, but they have their own obstacles of deadlines, increasing cost of paper, fees for designers, et cetera, that may hinder them from taking the time to get the book right, let alone perfect. And again, money helps to motivate. Then there's the question of who should select these books. Each year, some 80 Furthermore grantees, and Furthermore grantees are automatically up for the Alice Award, and dozens of non-Furthermore works are sifted by the staff and readers. I'm looking at a reader right now, and thank you. And 10 to 12 finalists are passed along to the jury. The members of the jury are all prominent in their fields, and our conversations and debates are fascinating. They currently represent art museums, that's Jock and me, arts organizations, Pauline Willis-Forlenza, Director of the American Federation of the Arts, foundations, Terry Carbone's here tonight, Program Director for American Art, the Henry Luce Foundation, publishers, David Godin, just retired after 50 years. You should hear David on paper stock, fonts, and end papers. Max Rudin, President and Publisher of the Library of America, trapped in England right now by COVID. Librarians, William P. Kelly, Andrew Mellon, Director, Emeritus, Research Libraries, New York Public Library, one of the most persuasive people on content, and illustrators like R.O. Bleckman, who designed the emblem for Furthermore. In the past, gallerists like Paula Cooper, designers like Michael Beirut of Pentagram, Massimo Vignelli, illustrators like Myra Kalman, and other professionals in the arts have served on the jury. How was such an impressive jury assembled? It's impossible to say no to Joan. Reading through a book that is both intellectually stimulating and visually engaging is one of life's great pleasures. The Alice Award encourages more of these to be produced. Hats off to Joan and all the staff that make this happen, and everyone who contributes to the making of beautiful books. That said, it's now my pleasure to introduce the Shortlist Awards. The shortlist was added in 2014. Each book receives $5,000. The competition this year was strong, and the jury selected 4 worthy titles. And I will present each award and ask representatives of each to say a few words. The first is Pioneer Works Art Foundations in Brooklyn. Pótoprens, The Urban Artists of Pótoprens, edited by Aaliyah Gordon and Josh Jelly Shapiro, and designed by Daniel Kent and Jesse Johanning, published by Pioneer Works Press in 2022. And I know that Josh is here, and I wasn't sure if Leah is as well, but Josh, would you come up?
You get this lovely award. Wonderful.
I can hold for you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, thank you, Ian. And thank you everyone for coming. Thank you to the Alice. Thank you to Joan. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here. In part because I was involved in a project last year, was it the year before, that had the honor of being awarded the Alice, the Infinite Cities box set, published by University of California Press, that I worked on with my collaborator, Rebecca Solnit, Rebecca Snedeker in New Orleans. And I remember when I first learned about the Alice, Rebecca and I were astonished that there was such an award that was here to honor precisely what we set out to do in those books, which is to honor the sort of importance of place and a sense of place for human beings, and also to honor the import and the unique power and beauty of a great book. And it's a thrill really to be here at the Strand, which is a holy place to me in New York. It's also right up the street from where I teach at NYU. Came here right from meeting students, which is my outfit. It's my meeting students outfit, not my receiving awards outfit. But wonderful to be here. And it's a great pleasure to be here this year to acknowledge this sort of wonderful honor of Pótoprens, this book that I worked on, being honored by the Alice. It was a labor of love that we grew out of an exhibition at Pioneer Works in Brooklyn. It's a book that's published in both English and in Haitian Creole. Really, I think the first book of its kind, an ambition to be published in both English and Haitian Creole. And so deep thanks are due to Pioneer Works and everyone there who was down to fund such a project. Gabriel Forens, who's not here, Vivian Chui, who is, Laurel's here, and our brilliant designers, Daniel Kent and Jesse Johanning, who made this book sing, made it a real object of beauty. And Leah Gordon as well, who's in England, but sends her thanks. So thank you, Alice. Thank you to all of you. And it's such a thrill to be here with all these extraordinarily beautiful books. So thank you.
It is a holy place. When I was a graduate student here in the 1970s, I spent all the money I didn't have here. And now they're all cluttering my bookshelves and I don't know what to do with them. I could reread them. The next award goes to the Cleveland Museum of Art, Private Lives, Home and Family in the Art of the Nabis, Paris, 1889 to 1900. Authors Mary Weaver Chapin and Heather Limonides Brown, designed by Tom Barnard, published by the Cleveland Museum of Art in 2021. And I believe that Mary Weaver Chapin and Heather Limonides Brown authors are going to come up and say a few words. Your award, which I can leave for you to pick up later.
Thank you. Good evening. Heather and I are so honored to be part of the shortlist for the Alice Award for our book, Private Lives, Home and Family in the Art of the Nabis, Paris, 1889 to 1900. Private Lives, in its content and format, and I should say in its creation, reflects the Alice Award's commitment to intimacy. The four artists in our book, Pierre Bonnard, Edouard Vuillard, Félix Vallotton, and Maurice Denis, worked in the last decade of the 19th century in Paris. They called themselves the Nabis, after the Hebrew word for prophet. They sought to create an art of suggestion and drew meaning from ordinary surroundings and what Bonnard termed the modest acts of life. Familiar interiors, close family members, beloved pets, and intimate friends were both the closest subjects at hand and those that offered the deepest well springs of sentiment and power. Even quotidian experiences such as a family dinner, a game of checkers with friends, or a musical gathering were worthy subjects for these artists. Close attention to the lived experience in all its mundane and magical glory prompted the critics to name them the intimist artists.
Although research for the book occurred in 2018 and 19, almost all of the writing took place in 2020 during the pandemic. Mary wrote from a card table in her bedroom in Portland, Oregon, and I wrote from my attic study in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Every Friday throughout 2020, we Zoomed from our respective homes, nearly 2,500 miles apart, giving one another feedback on our essays, discussing the contributions of our 4 guest authors, and eventually discussing the layout of the book with our brilliant designer, Tom Barnard, Director of Publications at the Cleveland Museum of Art. The process of creating the book blurred the lines between work and home. The book was created in the midst of home and family and enhanced our own understanding of the theme. Some days reflected the joys of Barnard's modest acts of life, while others echoed the words of critic Camille Mauclair, who pointed to the daily tragedy and mystery of ordinary existence. It's so meaningful for this book to have been shortlisted for the prestigious Alice Award that pays homage to the intimate experience of reading and enjoying a well-written and beautifully illustrated book. What an honor it is for us and the Portland Museum of Art and the Cleveland Museum of Art to be in such distinguished company. Mary and I extend our deep gratitude to Joan Davidson of Furthermore, Ian Wardropper, and the team of panelists, and to Nancy Bass-Wyden for hosting such a wonderful evening. Thank you.
And the third takes us to Chicago, the Art Institute Chicago, Ray Johnson, care of, edited by Caitlin Haskell with Jordan Carter and designed by Irma Boom, published by the Art Institute Chicago in 2021 and is accepted by Caitlin Haskell.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. Well, thank you, Ian. Thank you, Joan. What an honor to be here this evening representing the Art Institute and all of the authors who contributed to Ray Johnson, care of. I have to say I was not aware that we would be giving remarks tonight, but I'll just say for me personally, as someone who grew up the daughter of a librarian and the daughter of someone who worked in bookstores, I don't think I've ever been as touched to receive an award that also responds to motherhood and those relationships that are formed around books. Ray Johnson, care of was co-edited with Jordan Carter, who unfortunately can't be with us this evening, but I know that he was also deeply gratified to be recognized with a shortlist. I want to thank also Irma Bohm, who was an incredible designer to be able to work with. She immediately understood Ray Johnson's vision and embodied it in Ray Johnson, care of. Working on this book, as with all Art Institute books, the publications team directed our efforts impeccably. It was also a great joy to work with the estate of Ray Johnson. And I would say in closing, through this book, we were working on Ray Johnson, but we were also working on Bill Wilson, who built the collection that was the basis really of the Art Institute's Ray Johnson Holdings and that went into Ray Johnson, care of. And Bill was fond of talking about the art of friendship. And that's something that we also tried to cultivate in the making of this exhibition and catalog. So thank you all, and thank you again.
Well, for somebody who hadn't prepared remarks, that was excellent. The fourth and final short list is to the Museum of Modern Art, Sophie Taeuber-Arp, Living Abstraction, edited by Anne Umland and Walburga Krupp with Charlotte Healy and designed by Mark Nelson McCall Associates. published by the Museum of Modern Art, New York, and Kunstmuseum Basel in 2021, and accepted by, I believe, Curtis Scott, Associate Publisher in the Department of Publications of the Museum of Modern Art, and Charlotte Healy, Senior Research Associate in the Department of Prints and Drawings at the Art Institute of Chicago, and formerly a research assistant in the Department of Painting and Sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Ian. As a curatorial fellow and then a research assistant in the Department of Painting and Sculpture at the Museum of Modern Art, I had the distinct privilege of working with senior curator Anne Umland and independent curator Valberga Krupp on the groundbreaking exhibition, Sophie Taeuber-Arp, Living Abstraction, and the accompanying catalog, which was shortlisted for the Alice this year. I'm delighted to accept this shortlist award on behalf of my catalog co-editors, Anne and Valberga, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, as well as our superb book designer, Mark Nelson from McCall Associates, who is here tonight with his partner, David Zaza, and the many other talented individuals who worked tirelessly during the pandemic to produce this beautiful volume and significant contribution to the scholarship on Taeuber-Arp and early 20th century modernism more generally. We are honored that our efforts to shed light on this previously underappreciated yet vibrant and multi-talented female artist have been recognized by Joan Davidson, furthermore, and the Alice jury, alongside these other very deserving publications. Thank you. And now, Curtis Scott.
Thank you. I'm Curtis Scott, Associate Publisher at the Museum of Modern Art, and I'm very pleased to accept this honor on behalf of the many people involved in bringing this beautiful publication into existence. And it's very humbling to be in the company of these other great publications as well, and in the presence of so many devotees of publishing. The subject of the book, Sophie Taeuber-Arp, was a multi-talented modern artist who created profoundly innovative work across many disciplines. The exhibition traced her career's trajectory from applied arts teacher, participant in the Dada movement, and maker of textiles and objects, to designer of murals, stained glass windows, furniture, interiors, and buildings, to painter, sculptor, magazine editor, and early champion of geometric abstraction. For Taeuber-Arp, abstraction was always connected to an everyday lived reality in which objects were to be used and manipulated, spaces to be moved about in, and artworks to be looked at and experienced. Her creations responded to their time and place of making, in keeping with her own expressed ambition to, quote, make living things in a new style that is fitting for us. Her fluid movement between genres, disciplines, and creative roles makes her especially relevant for contemporary artists, while her work proposes a more open-ended and inclusive way of thinking about the history of modern art. Mounting an exhibition or creating a publication of this scale and scope would be challenging at any time, but our work was made even more difficult by the fact that it occurred during the earliest days of the pandemic. I had been at MoMA for just a few days in November of 2019 when I was introduced to the project. By the early days of 2020, the book was well underway with plans to produce both English and German editions. When the pandemic hit in March 2020 and the museum and much of the world closed down, we were all just kept going, working from home without knowing if and when we would be able to actually mount the exhibition. The opening at MoMA, originally planned for the fall of 2020, was delayed by a year, but the books were published on time anyway, so that they could be available for the opening in Basel, which now became the first of the three venues. The book proved so popular that we had to reprint it before we had even opened the exhibition in the US. Sophie Taeuber-Arp Living Abstraction features some 400 works, including textiles, applied art subjects, marionettes, interior and architectural designs, furniture, paintings, relief sculptures, works on paper, photographs, and a selection of printed matter. It reintroduces this extraordinary artist to a new generation of art lovers, advances our understanding of Taeuber-Arp's distinctive cross-pollinating approach to abstraction, and explores the different ways in which her work challenged the boundaries separating fine art from craft and design. While it would be impossible to name everyone involved in the short time we have this evening, I do want to thank a few people without whom the book would simply not exist. First and foremost, I wish to recognize Anne Umland, the Blanchette Hooker Rockefeller Senior Curator of Painting and Sculpture at MoMA, who developed the exhibition in collaboration with independent curator Walter Krupp and with research assistant Charlotte Healy. Laura Braverman, curatorial assistant, oversaw countless details for the exhibition and also compiled the book's invaluable chronology. My colleagues in the publication department at MoMA kept the project going through every imaginable challenge. The catalog planning process was begun by MoMA's publisher, Christopher Hudson, who established a firm foundation for the project prior to his retirement in the summer of 2020. Editorial director Don McMahon provided invaluable guidance, overseeing the work of freelance editor Alexander Scrimger, translator Elizabeth Tucker, and proofreader Jackie Newdorf. The book's elegant design was created by Mark Nelson, assisted by his colleagues Alan Miller and David Zaza at McCall Associates. Mark Saper, director of design and production at MoMA, oversaw the detailed color work, even purchasing a portable light booth so that he could accurately correct the images from home during the pandemic. Hannah Kim, business and marketing director, made sure we were able to keep on budget and also made sure the finished books reached its many grateful readers. And Naomi Falk and Sophie Golub navigated the complicated network of permissions required for the many works reproduced in the book. As the saying goes, it takes a village, and I'm immensely grateful that my village includes these and many other talented and dedicated people. Thank you very much.
Well, it's good to be reminded just how many people go into making a book like that. And I'm glad we're acknowledging the designers who could be here tonight as well. And the heroics that many people accomplished during the pandemic to keep publications going. It really was extraordinary. So we are now at the point where we are ready to award the prize winner. And the winner is Alphawood Foundation, Chicago, Reconstructing the Garrick, Adler and Sullivan's Lost Masterpiece, edited by John Vinci with Tim Samuelson, Eric Nordstrom, and Chris Ware. I'm sorry, and Chris Ware was the designer of the book. And it will be accepted by Chirag G. Badlani, Executive Director, but I just want to say a few words about this book first personally. This year's winner, Reconstructing the Garrick and Adler and Sullivan's Lost Masterpiece. In the mid-70s, I took a course with the great architectural historian Henry Russell Hitchcock on Chicago architecture. Several years later, when I was offered a job at the Art Institute of Chicago, I flew out and my first day walked around to look for the great buildings of the late 19th and early 20th century that I had studied, particularly Louis Henry Sullivan's, as I had written a paper on his spectacular use of ornament. Many, if not most of them, no longer existed. I should have known this from the course, but it still came as a shock. Chicago is a dynamic city. It grows, it changes. As Carl Sandburg wrote in The Windy City in 1914, put the city up, tear the city down. The book about the Garrick is about one of these buildings that disappeared. Moreover, it's about a building that, like Penn Station in New York, first galvanized the preservation movement. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Chirag Badlani, the Executive Director of Alphawood Foundation, a private foundation working for an equitable, just, and humane society. Each year, Alphawood awards grants to organizations primarily in the areas of advocacy, architecture, and preservation, the arts and arts education, the promotion and protection of the rights of LGBTQ plus persons, and people living with HIV/AIDS. Through Alphawood exhibitions, it also presents socially engaged art and architecture exhibitions at Wrightwood 659 in Chicago, designed by Pritzker Prize-winning architect Tadeo Ando, and it shows exhibitions such as Romanticism to Ruin, two lost works of Sullivan and Wright about the Garrick Theater, curated by the same team that worked to create this wonderful book. Chirag.
So thank you, Ian, and thank you to the entire Alice 2022 jury, Furthermore Grants in Publishing, Joan Davidson, and the J.M. Kaplan Fund for this wonderful award and for the honor of putting Alphawood Foundation as publisher in the same esteemed category as the other shortlisted institutions. I'm going to turn it over to John Vinci, the man of the hour, in just a moment, but just wanted to say before I did that, as Ian said in his introduction, Reconstructing the Garrick accompanied an exhibition at Wrightwood 659 in Chicago in 2021. I started as executive director at Alphawood after that exhibition, after the book had been decided and published. So I have the benefit of being entirely objective when I say that the book is truly one of incredible quality of scholarship and design, and one I know that my colleagues are incredibly proud to have worked on with John, with Chris Ware, the designer, with Tim Samuelson, and with Eric Nordstrom, who's also here tonight. John's vision, his drawings, and his own personal experience with the building. So in addition to cataloging the actual brilliance of the building, it also talks very intimately and passionately about taking down the building, because John was there, and the book is much richer for it. So John's contribution, Tim Samuelson's ability to paint a rich historical picture with words, Eric Nordstrom's archival prowess, and Chris Ware's incredible design choices all contributed to the success of this book. And I'd highlight Chris Ware's contribution as well. Some of the earlier material on the award miscredited the designer, so I just want to make sure Chris gets credit, full credit as the designer. And some of those really interesting details when you look at the book are gatefolds that really highlight John's drawings, and the inclusion of Richard Nichols' notebook within the book itself, which really adds to the value. I also want to acknowledge Gina Pollara, who's here for her role on the Alphawood Wrightwood team in getting this book to publication, and our founder, Fred Eichner, who was an early supporter of the project and who I know greatly values John's contributions to Chicago and the preservation movement. John is taking parts of the Wrightwood 659 exhibition, including the Garrick's drawings, a 3D rendering, and the model of the Garrick that was at Wrightwood 659 to Venice for an exhibition opening at the Cha Pesaro next month. If you're going to Venice, or maybe now you're inspired to go to Venice, I encourage you all to see that exhibition, because it really it's going to be incredible as well. Speaking of exhibitions, I would be remiss if I did not encourage you all to visit Chicago this fall and winter, to visit Wrightwood 659, even though visit, Chicago, and winter are not words you hear together in the same sentence very often. But our exhibitions this season, one is called First Homosexuals, Global Depictions of a New Identity. It explores same-sex desire in art after the term homosexual emerged as an identity category, which is an incredibly important conversation during times of increasing attacks on LGBTQ people in our society. And a second exhibition, Celestial Stage, features the paintings and works of Michiko Itatani, a Japanese-American artist based in Chicago. Before I turn it over to John, I also want to acknowledge that today is Diwali. It is celebrated by Hindus and many others in South Asia and beyond, and represents the victory of light over darkness, good over evil, and knowledge over ignorance. And it's incredibly important to celebrate light and good and knowledge in this increasingly darkening world. And I know of no better source of light and good and knowledge than books. And so I applaud all of you who are bringing more light and good and knowledge into the world through books. May you continue to persevere. And with that, I will turn it over to John Vinci. I know he needs no introduction, because every person I spoke to during the cocktail hour asked where John was. They knew him from previous experience and just know how wonderful he is. But needless to say, he is an incredibly important person in Chicago and around the country, and an incredible architect, activist, and preservationist, and responsible for many important projects in Chicago. And so, please, John.
Thank you, Joan Davidson. I didn't know such an award existed, or that I would ever get such an award. So I'm very grateful. The story starts in 1961 when Richard Nickel, a photographer, was commissioned to salvage parts of the Garrick Theater after a brutal fight to try to save the building. And I was hired as a colleague along with David Norris, and we took the building apart piece by piece and saved them. And the experience never left me. I mean, the building left a profound image on my mind that someday something had to be done about the building. What happens, buildings come down and they're forgotten. Nobody goes further into their history. Nobody delves into their importance or their structure mainly. And I could remember sitting in that building on the roof of the building with Richard Nickel and saying, you know, the more this building comes down, the more beautiful it becomes. And so anyway, now go back to 2017, 2018, I was in my office. I was, nobody wanted to work with me, you know, they're all on computers and so forth. And so I decided to start a project, and I started making these drawings of the Garrick and did a lot of research. And then one day I called up Fred and I said to Fred Eichner, that is, I said, Fred, you know, these beautiful drawings I'm making of the Garrick, and would make a nice little exhibition in the Ondo Museum. And he generously said, talk to Alphawood and you can do it. So then my mind expanded on how do you do an exhibition on a building that represented so much of Chicago. For example, the building was built by the German American community. It was one of the largest communities in Chicago. And in fact, they controlled the park systems and so forth. But they were fractured like many, and if you all know about the Haymarket riots occurred at about this time. But there was an elderly German there who ran the newspaper who decided to build a German opera house for Chicago and embellish it with art and music. And it was named after Schiller, the great poet. And this was his aspiration, but it was not to be. I mean, the building opens with great ceremony, but it aspired to what it meant to be. For example, I don't know of any opera that was performed there or any show or play, for example. So, and Mr. Hesse, which was his name, dies shortly after his manager dies. The building goes into litigation. It's bought by the Schubert chain and it becomes a vaudeville house. So all of this history became very interesting to me and to be explored. And so I thought, I made a structure. I wanted something about the preservation movement. So I hired Dan Bluestone, who I knew as a great historian, especially on controversial subjects. And it turns out he had already done research on it for a previous author and was never given credit. So he had a head start on the material. And then one day I bumped into Kathleen Haskell and I said, Kathleen, do you know much about the 19th century? Can you do something about the history of the building and the art in the building? It is not probably the greatest and by our taste today, but it was embellished with beautiful rondel heads and figures of all kinds and geometry and Sullivan's incredible ornament. And she said, yes, she would think about it. So we went to the coffee house and we came to terms. And then she called me one day and she said, would you know if my husband worked with me? His name was Kirk Nickel. Well, when we heard the word nickel, like Richard Nickel, I thought this is, a sign from heaven. So Kirk Nickel became part of the project, and he was an incredible researcher. He was working at the what's the library called? No, not the Ryerson. What? Newberry Library, thank you. And he came up with a fantastic essay. And of course, one of the people I went to was Tim Samuelson. I said, Tim, are you going to help me with this exhibition? He said, yes. He said, I'll try to get Chris Ware to work with us. He said, the two of us did an exhibition on Louis Sullivan, and he may want to work with us. And if you use him, books will sell like crazy because he's very famous. Anyway, so I don't know if you know his graphic novels, but they are pretty extraordinary. He is world famous, but any case, he designed the installation and the book, and that was a wonderful thing. And Eric Strand, who did a lot of research for me and with me. At one time, he came to my house, and I had given the Richard Nickel archive to the Art Institute of Chicago, and he went there once a week and worked and recorded all the material in the Richard Nickel archive, the letters, the photographs, and so forth. So we had before us a wealth of information, and that became the body of this book. So it's it's a labor of love, and I think it's an appropriate book with scholarship is what I wanted, and I think we achieved. The Italians, as I call the Italianos, they came in late. I was talking to an Italian on the phone, and he said, I teach at the University of Venice, and they may be interested. And I said, no, Italians don't know much about Louis Sullivan and don't care. He was a scholar. He will like this project. So I talked to Marco, and Marco, obviously he's not truly Italian with a name like that, but he's a professor at the University of Venice, and he started, my assistant, Angela, sent him everything, all of Eric's photographs, all of the research I did, all of my drawings, and Marco was able to interpret these drawings. For example, I found 98 drawings at the Chicago History Museum, which were done by an engineer, but they had no access to where they were. You had to figure out where this truss was located and so forth. It was just an engineering. Marco was able to read the charts and pinpoint everything, so we were able to reconstruct the actual structure of the building, including the actual plan, because these buildings got altered from the day they were built. They were altered. I mean, the exits got altered, the entrances got altered, the building got altered. So there was a lot of research involved. So I want to thank you especially, and thank you all for being. Wow. I hope we have walk. Thank you. I'm going to be here now and clear it up later.
Thank you. I'm delighted. My old friend, John Vinci, who was legendary when I left Chicago 20 years ago, he's now beyond legend, could receive this award. And again, I want to thank everybody for this evening.